Before we begin, 2 messages. When my company needed to develop a key mobile product, one that I was counting on as a new source of revenue, I knew exactly who to turn to. Macadamian. They delivered on time with incredible attention to detail, and I was able to get product into customers' hands faster than I ever thought possible. I've personally known them for 10 years, and they do make great products even better. Check them out at www.macadamian.com. Here's a riddle. How do you build native cross-platform mobile applications quickly without having to rewrite code and hire consultants at a huge cost? Titanium from Appcelerator. Called the easy button for mobile application development, it allows you to focus more on what's important, getting product out the door. Join the more than 1.5 million active developers who have created over 13,000 apps at www.appcelerator.com. Hello everybody, welcome to Untethered.tv. This is where we actually have great casual conversations with mobile rock stars. And brought another one live from Brooklyn, New York. Silicon Alley, is that what they're calling it, Scott?
Yeah, they're trying to call it that.
Everybody wants to mimic Silicon Alley. I'm from Ottawa, which is Silicon Valley North. That's what we've called it, But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about Broadcastr. Now, I'm going to paint a scenario for everybody who's watching or listening to this, is that I have a personal belief that what we're doing right now in mobile, among other things, revolutionizing the way we pay, the way we view things, the way we interact with people and content, we're also writing our own legacy. We're writing our own biographies. And we're doing it one step at a time through photos from Instagram. We're doing this through messages, Twitter posts, SMS, anything you can imagine. It's accumulating your life story. And I believe that in a generation or two, my great-grandkids are going to be standing on a corner somewhere, and they're going to be able to listen to me having an experience on that exact same corner, my voice, but 100 years removed from my death, which hopefully is in a number of years, not soon. But they're going to be able to experience my life through my own words. And I think that part of that is documenting that, and part of that documentation is what Broadcastr is ultimately doing. Maybe not that deep, but do you hope, Scott, that this is what actually happens with what you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. Broadcastr, to put it very simply, is definitely in line with exactly what you're talking about. It's a free social media application and platform. It's on the web at broadcastr.com. It's on the iPhone as a free app, and it's on the Android in about a week and a half. And it just lets anybody anywhere in the world tell a story in the best way they know how, right? So you tell your personal story in your own voice, which is the way that we communicate most of the time. And then you take that little audio snippet and you marry it to location, right? So when you're telling a story, it might be about the first time you fell in love. It might be about the place that you used to live when you lived in Ottawa, if we're talking about many years in the future. You put that story in that place. And then a user can navigate on this map online or on their phones to these different places around the world. So they go to Ottawa and then they can filter the map, right? So let's say they want to hear stories about family or stories about houses or love stories, etc. And they're going to find your story there. They click on it and they listen to it. And that's great. But the part that is more in line with what you were talking about, which is really like augmented reality, right? Like, how do I take this idea of a story in a place and actually put it back out into the real world? Right? I'm not interested so much in a simulation of the world, which is something we've been doing on the internet now for years, right?
Yeah.
I want the actual real world experience. I want the real social networking. So on the mobile side, you can do all that same filtering, but let's say you're in Ottawa and you're taking a walk down the street. You can filter your app for love stories, the Broadcastr app, and then you hit a function we call geoplay, which is geolocated playback. And what it does is, as you encounter the locations in reality where stories are virtually pinned, stories that you're interested in because you've filtered for love stories, those stories automatically stream into your earphones. And so what's happening is you're having an augmented experience. Your hands and your eyes are free, and you're interacting with your world, and yet you're also tapping into this invisible layer of history, of memory, of experience, in the voices of people that have done meaningful things in the exact place where you're standing. So you can imagine, for instance, if I walked by your childhood home and you had pinned a story there about, you know, the first time that you remember playing in the backyard with your brother or your cousin, etc., that story is going to emerge as if I'm communicating with your home automatically, right?
That's
and
incredible.
It's just going to hit me right in the ears, and now I'm going to have this meaningful experience, and suddenly the secret history of the place will be unlocked for me.
I mean, go back. How long have you guys been around?
We came up with the idea in 2009.
Okay.
At the end of 2009, we raised a little bit of money in early 2010, and we started wireframing this thing, you know, which means just laying out the initial designs, in around July of 2010, and we've been developing on all 3 platforms over the last 8 months. We just launched the web app about 3 weeks ago. iPhone app came out about 2 weeks ago during South by Southwest, and the Android app will be out next week. So we're very, very new, but we've been in development for just over 8 months.
Okay, so go back to the very beginning. What's your background? Very quickly, what's your background? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how you end up in documenting audio samples, geolocated audio samples.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's funny, like, we didn't come at it, me and my business partner, Andy Hunter, didn't come at it from a real tech person side. We both met in an MFA program for fiction writing. And
seriously?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
We were studying under Michael Cunningham at Brooklyn College, who famously wrote The Hours.
Yeah.
You know, amazing narrative, right? And we were totally interested in bringing literary content to the digital age. We had a company before this called Electric Literature that did just that. We published literary fiction with multimedia content to the iPhone and the iPad. And we just were thinking broader than that. We wanted to take these forms of storytelling that had depth and connected people in a meaningful way and bring them more wholly into the digital age. And when we looked at the social media landscape, we saw people, as you said, tweeting, Instagramming, going to Facebook, going to YouTube.
Yep.
We saw this huge gap, right, where the way that the form of communication that's held humanity together for 100,000 years, right, the oral tradition hadn't made it,
I know.
right? It just didn't make the leap. So we just thought, like, there's a huge opportunity here for us to take the depth and meaning in storytelling we love and do something that could really change the way we think, not only about social media and storytelling, but specifically about the way mobile is bringing all those elements back into our world to create a deeper, more meaningful engagement in our lives.
So you pen the idea of Broadcastr. Like,
yeah.
You think that you know, everybody seems to be, as we said before, you know, everybody jumped text-based, fine, but it moved into something like Instagram, which is a raging success, but for different reasons, obviously. But geolocation services like Foursquare and Facebook and Goala at a point, Yelp and all these guys, and then there's the coming phase right now, which is video. So short video, you know, the same kind of sharing and distribution like Instagram. But people skipped over the spoken word, which is really interesting. And you guys pick up on that and say, listen, there's an audio layer. People are still doing audiobooks. People are still getting audio tours of museums. Why not bring that layer to the common person to be able to document the streets ultimately? Absolutely.
And there's also other components to that too, which is when you're really talking about, like, the mobile experience, right? What you have to think about is what happens to the actual user when they're interacting with information on their phone out in the world. Well, if it's video is sexy, and I love video, right? But it means you have to be looking at a screen, right? So computing, when you're talking about video content, this is my iPhone, it looks like this, right? Where I'm looking at a screen and I'm not looking out here.
Yep.
And same thing with text, etc. And so with audio, it's really the only medium, not only is it underserved, but it's the only medium where you can still be immersed in your world and yet be tapped in to an extra relevant layer of information. So it's strange to me that it was skipped over, but I think one of the reasons it was is because not until media is expected to stream onto mobile devices and until there was a sophisticated system for mapping location and marrying it to social graph and to content, did this even become a possibility? So, you know, of course, video would dominate on the desktop and on the laptop. Of course, text-based things would dominate when we had keyboards and when we were sitting in front of our computers at work all day. But now we're out and about. We're out in the world. So we need a more sophisticated system and a different kind of media.
Yeah, it strikes me as, why didn't everybody else think about this? And it's so funny, as you said, it's probably that perfect storm of location and device capability that allows this to happen so quickly, or maybe not so quickly, but in your case, it's been less than a year since launch to product. So when you went through this process of deciding what you wanted to do, was it a no-brainer for you guys? Did you just look at this and say, well, of course?
Well, what happened was we started with the idea of audio, and then it's deceptively complex, right? To figure out how to actually deliver that, and we had to do a ton of research because in order to be streaming this kind of content, you really need an incredibly sophisticated back end. And so we started working a little bit with a representative at Google and ended up ultimately using a lot of their technology behind our interface in order to make this thing possible. Because when you're dealing with Broadcastr, like if you look here, this is the iPhone app.
Yeah.
What you've got is a graphic interface, right? So when I do this and I actually zoom in on the map, what I'm essentially doing is I'm changing the parameters of a search by manipulating a graphic. And then the way that my phone requeries the database and repopulates the map with new items, it has to make an incredible amount of calls all at once.
Yes.
Right? And when I just do something really simple, like when I do that,
when you pan left or right, exactly.
Suddenly it has to recall the database, and of course the user expects that within 2 milliseconds, right, the map is going to repopulate and they're going to have all new items to look at. So for us, there were a ton of technical things we had to think about because user expectation is way out in front of mobile technology and cell technology. And then we also had to make a lot of big decisions, like was there going to be a web component?
Yeah.
And why? Why is that useful? And for us, we thought basically like, yes, the mobile apps are where we imagine all this magical stuff will happen, especially with GeoPlay, right? But it's really important to have a web portal because people can then very easily access it that don't have an iPhone 4 today, and they can contribute, right? So every story or every interaction on Broadcastr can be two-way, right? It can be as a listener, as a consumer of this oral content, but it can also be as a creator. And we didn't want to limit the creators to just the small percentage of people that have very advanced smartphones.
So, I mean, when you guys first set out last summer to think about what it was that you were going to do, were you battling at that point, or did you guys go iPhone app first and then contemplate the website, or was it just you built it all in concert?
Yeah, we built it all concurrently, okay. And the reason for that was because a lot of the functionality that we saw necessary on one, there would be very, very specific reasons to do it differently on another. So as we were working on one platform, it would inform ideas about the other, and we realized we just had to do it all at the same time.
Yeah.
And then, of course, every platform is connected back to the same database of items. So it kind of made sense as we were working on the server side of things to make sure it was optimized for everything.
So let's talk about that whole process. I don't want to talk about the technology as much, because that's probably where you spend a lot of your time in building this, and it always seems like the simple things, like hey, geotag some audio, play it back, man, piece of cake, right? You do a great job of hiding the complexity. That means that you've done a great job on the technology side. What did you hope to get? I mean, what was the hope when you were building this out, that this would be that you wouldn't be able to find a corner or a street corner that didn't have an audio stamp somewhere along the lines? Yeah,
our real hope is to take, if you want to talk in grand terms, it's to really take humanity's collective sense of experience and layer it back over the world, right? And democratize that ability so much so that you'll be able to walk anywhere and learn about that place, not through some high-level Wikipedia definition, but actually from the ground up, right? In the voices of people that have had meaningful experiences there. And to that end, a huge amount of our time last year was spent forming partnerships with organizations that we thought would be doing exemplary stuff with the service and would set a precedent for how it can be used.
So examples of that?
Yeah, one of those was, for instance, the 9/11 Memorial. We're an official partner with them. And so now, this year on the 10-year anniversary of 9/11, when the memorial opens in downtown Manhattan, users are going to be able to, or visitors rather, will be able to walk around the memorial and not just look at this hole in the ground that's been very well polished, but actually tap into this layer through Broadcastr and hear the voices from the official 9/11 archive of, cops, firefighters, the families of victims, first responders. And in that way, not only tap into the real history and meaning of the place, but also see how they can start to talk about this issue, right, while they're there, and then have the ability to not only listen, but contribute, right? So each partnership sets a precedent for how the user can then get involved in the conversation. So to that end, on the mission and message-driven side, 9/11, yes, definitely, but also the Shoah Foundation is a great example. Mm-hmm. So they were started by Steven Spielberg after Schindler's List, and they have 105,000 hours of Holocaust survivor testimony, but it's all sitting on a hard drive at USC. So now there's 53 items that we help them curate and pin to Auschwitz II, Birkenau, which is, of course, the death camp in Poland. Yeah. And so if you're a 15-year-old kid that goes there with your family, you're going to be able to have a much richer experience by walking through this, what is now basically an empty field, and actually hearing people that escaped 60 years prior. I mean, it actually makes history like come back out of the ground. But then on the flip side, right, we're also partnering with bands who are traveling across the country and doing tour diaries, right, audio diaries. You hear them in the van, you hear them doing things on the road, you hear little snippets from the shows, etc. About 200 different comedians here in New York. New York City Department of Parks, you can walk through Central Park and hear about strawberry fields, and hear about the monuments that are around you, or Fodor's travel guides. And, we're also working now with some media partners to use it as a news source like Human Rights Watch, etc. So we spent a ton of time building up this kind of content to make sure that when it launched, it wasn't just a cool idea, but you could go there and have a great experience right away.
So, Scott, you're blowing me away here because, when you start to think about the simple idea and what you can achieve with this, what you can do, what you can document, what you can curate almost. We've often called, nothing brings out technology like a natural disaster, something like, the earthquake and tsunami that happened in Japan, or the what's going on in Libya. Certainly, technology's played a role in capturing that and disseminating that and making sure that everybody's aware of what's going on in there. But what you're talking about is the similar things, but just documenting history. So when you walk down a street, regardless of the time, how long it's been, you're going to be able to hear the voices of the people that have actually created or who were part of that historical movement. I think. And certainly from the human rights side, that sounds so interesting to be able to document what's going on, in real time in audio. So when you were thinking this, was this what you were thinking of? This kind of big thought, or were you just thinking, hey, it would be pretty neat to be able to capture this kind of audio?
Well, what we thought was, okay, audio's great, but it's failed many times to make the leap, right? The great case is, of course, Odeo, right, which was a podcasting company that just was flaming out, and then the Hail Mary pass to save Odeo was a group messaging service that turned out to be Twitter, right? And so audio and storytelling, oral storytelling, was not enough. Even when we thought about how much we love that and how often we're talking to each other at bars or over coffee, etc., and no matter how many show foundations there are in the world with these great archives or how many public radio stations, audio itself is not enough. We had to find a compelling way to index it to deliver an experience that was completely unique. So it wasn't until we conceived of this GeoPlay idea that we actually knew we had something to move on. And that happened when Andy was down in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and he was walking around, and we were thinking, okay, what are we going to do? We want to build a platform. What's it going to be? And he saw somebody, stapling up to like a post, a little thing that's like, hey, guitar lessons, right? Or a lost cat or whatever it was. And he's like, you should be able to put your story up.
Somewhere. Yep.
Like somewhere. Not just up online, but like the way that you would put up a poster, right? To alert the people in your immediate area what your opinions are or what you need, etc. And so then it became clear that what we were talking about was a map-based graphic interface which of course dovetailed with this idea of location-based services, and people like Foursquare really blazed the trail to get people thinking about location.
Yep.
And it added that third C, right? So you start with like 90s technology, which is very content driven. And then you've got, after that, connectivity, which is like what we're talking about with Twitter, where the content created isn't evergreen, but its momentary value is very high.
Yep.
Like I can communicate an idea right now and get it out there. But then the next C that happens, right, is context. And like context means location. It means like not just who you know, but it means where you are and what you want at a certain moment. And we realized that we could, by using GPS technology, mobile technology, and audio specifically, we could achieve something that would really impact, we believed, how people thought about that third C, how they thought about context. And if things like Facebook showed us that our friends are important, our hope is that Broadcastr is going to show us that the places where we live are just as important.
So, you know, what's going through my head as you describe this is that this is there's a clear opportunity for revenue. And I don't want to switch topics on us, but I'm going to here because, you know, ultimately to make sure that this is sustainable, that the stories are able to be told for years to come, you guys have to start to generate some revenue in some way, shape, or form. Or find enough funding to make sure that it's archived. I mean, data or storage is cheap now, so not so worried about that. But how you can work with the 9/11 Foundation, you can work with all the other organizations, and I'm going to assume that they pay you. Is that your source of revenue? Is that what you envision as your source?
With most of those organizations, it's free. First of all, Broadcastr is free to use, and most of those organizations aren't paying us. We are just working with them because we think it adds to the value of the platform.
100%. Yeah.
But that said, you can imagine running a branded campaign on Broadcastr, and we've been talking to a bunch of larger international brands about this. I shouldn't mention their names exactly now, but the idea of being able to say like, hey, here are some stories presented in a certain campaign, right? Like let's just say it was a car company, and they were like, it's not really a car till you take it on a road trip, right? And they're like, here's our road trip, but we want to know your road trip, right? And then they encourage the audience to then go on and post content, and that content can be aggregated into playlists and shared and posted on websites and embedded just like a YouTube video, etc. And so branded campaigns like that, of course, we would charge a partner for. But the main revenue source that we're looking at eventually is the same engine we're developing that allows for micro-targeted, socially aware, location-specific content will also allow for local businesses to have micro-targeted, location-aware advertising and deals, right, that affect the people in their immediate community. So you could imagine like a movie theater in your town, right, an independent movie theater that's showing the Woody Allen Marathon. Well, there's no effective way for them to do an ad spend in digital space because a local business doesn't have a ton of money to advertise for something specific like that. And how do they know they're targeting the right audience? Well, if you take something like Broadcastr, you could say, I only want my ad to play when someone is walking within a quarter mile of my movie theater so they can actually see the place, right? They're listening to an item that's tagged in the arts and culture category with the keyword film associated with it. And then my ad or my deal for like, hey, stop by our movie theater and get 2-for-1 tickets on the Woody Allen Marathon becomes content, right? Because my business is just as much a part of the community that's speaking about its experiences as the people in it, right? And then we don't have to go beg like a major brand to support us. We can, all these local businesses be part of this kind of prismatic view of a place. And we can know that the content, if we succeed in our kind of recommendation system and our organizing system for how we deliver content, we can be sure that the ads are delivered in a way that allows them to fold in nicely with the actual anecdotal content created by users. So you could think like, for instance, when you flip through a fashion magazine, sometimes it can be very hard to distinguish between what is an ad and what is a photo spread, right? Because it's micro targeted. You can take that to the absolute extreme where it's not only micro-targeted by topic, but also by the immediate listening history of the user and the physical location where the user is standing. So if I'm walking through that community listening to arts and culture items about film, I might hear an ad for the local movie theater. But if I'm listening to stories about food, I might hear about an ad for like the local sandwich shop. And those things are going to be a part of my experience in a positive way.
See, it just strikes me that what we're doing here, you guys as well as a lot of the other companies that are leveraging the location space, is obviously rewriting the rules of advertising and promotion, and not really. Even Facebook is doing this with Facebook Places, is allowing not just they're not doing it yet, but they will eventually. They're allowing the everyday business to participate in this world that that was once dominated. Not often are you going to look at digital advertising simply because it doesn't make sense, as you said, on a local basis.
Right.
But when you've got these devices in your hand and you're actually engaging at a local place, all of a sudden it's become the hot topic, for advertising and targeting.
Yeah, and when I was down in Austin at South by Southwest, there was a great panel with the guys from Living Social.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how in this new world that you're talking about, which is at once global and hyper-local, right? Yeah. In that it's affecting everyone across the planet, but because of these things, it's actually as local as where you're standing. Yeah. What you have is what used to feel like an ad suddenly transcends and becomes content. And so in the mobile local space, something that used to feel like it was promotional suddenly just feels like part of your experience in a positive way. And some users actually seek it out. So, you see, for instance, like if you had a promotions category on Broadcastr, the same as you have an arts and culture or a funny category, there may be days when you're walking around and that's actually the content you desire. And so for you at that moment, that content is local, right? It's audio, it's streaming, it's mobile, and it just so happens to be giving you a better way to interact with your world economically, not just entertainment-wise or historically.
So how do you manage? Like literally, I could be walking down the street and be like bombarded by 14 different ads coming at me at the same time. How do you manage it so that they don't overlap? Lawn and lat. Like I could be standing on the street corner and get 15 different messages.
Yeah, sure. Well, our big challenge, and if we succeed, our big success will be building a system that can accurately categorize, sort, and deliver any kind of content, whether it's audio-based personal content, advertising content, or really ultimately any media content. Yeah. That is going to be our biggest challenge. Right now we've got a rating system for content. We have a categorization system. We also have like a hashtag-like system. And all of those things together, combined with the actual lat-long, right, location, yep, plus eventually some kind of API, for like maybe the Foursquare API, for instance, for naming the different places, right? Just the actual lat-long with the fact that this is the Broadcastr offices, right? Yep. Start to combine all this information, and suddenly the goal is to be able to make an intelligent suggestion. So, for example, let's say you always listen to history on Broadcastr, right? But when you hear the history of a park, you always skip it or you rate it low. And when you hear the history of a building, you always rate it highly, right? Or you share it to Facebook or to Twitter, etc., as you can with our app. Well, eventually we want the system to know that 9 times out of 10, you skip the history of the park item. So if you're standing somewhere and there are 2 items available, both are rated 5 stars, right? But one of them is about a park and the other is about a building, it should be smart enough to know we're going to give you the building. And it should be smart enough to know, let's say you and I both listen to history and we have similar preferences, but then one day you listen to an arts and culture item for the first time. And I've already listened to a bunch of arts and culture items. It should know, well, we cross-reference these social graphs. We see that we both have similar tastes in our history items. So for your first arts and culture item, I'm not just going to give you the highest rated one. I'm going to give you the highest rated one that Scott also likes, right, and has rated highly, as opposed to somebody else, right? And so eventually what you'll get is a more and more hands-free experience, where more and more it's just going to be about moving through the world, right, setting very basic parameters and getting the relevant content that you need. At this moment, we're working with a rating system, categories, hashtags, location, etc. And each story plays through, and when it's done, then the database is requeried and your location is requeried to then kind of draw in your next item in a semi-intelligent way. But within a year, we're going to be talking about building almost like a Netflix-style algorithm for place and media content.
Do you have to? Do you literally have to build out a, how fast the average human walks, kind of thing? Is there a limit to how long people can speak on these things? Just because you've got to be cognizant that it might skip something if it's a 2-minute post. That I've been able to travel 300 or 400 meters during that. I'm a slow walker, right? But
so the way it works right now, first of all, there is a 3-minute limit, and we found most stories can be told in 3 minutes. And if they can't, it's more to the user's benefit to tell them in multiple placements, so that the person walking can actually engage and feel like they're moving through a series of kind of like you would move through songs on an album, for instance.
Yep.
If you're listening to an item, let's say you're in a car, right, and you're moving at 60 miles an hour, no matter what, you're going to be missing items as you go along. So it's playing back the item that you're listening to until that item's finished. Once the item is finished, in about 2 milliseconds, the database is requeried for your new position, and then the most relevant closest item is played at that moment.
Yep.
And of course, this is only in this geoplay mode, right? You can also just navigate freely,
right,
and play back items of your choosing as you do.
Yep. So let me ask you this, Scott. Do you have a huge whiteboard that you're looking at all the time and thinking about how to make this product so easy to use? Because it just seems like the possibilities are incredible, and it must fill up your head all day with the way that you're trying to figure out this algorithm. Like even talking about a Netflix-like rating system or recommendation engine, so to speak. It might sound simple to people who have never tried to build this, but there are so many things. What's that?
It sounds simple. It's impossible.
But there's so many connectors that you have to put together, and things that you haven't thought about, and strands of this and strands of that, and all of a sudden you've got your head explodes, quite literally, trying to build this out. Is there a day that goes by that you don't think about something else that would make it, your service even more relevant?
The funny thing is, the answer is exactly what you think, which is no. It goes by. There's not a second when you're not thinking, how could this be better? And you can think up a way. Once you have that basic framework, like even someone listening to this right now might think of something like, oh, but hey, my iPhone has the compass ability. Shouldn't the direction I'm facing also affect the nature of what I'm listening to?
Yeah.
Yes.
Damn you!
Right? Damn you, compass guy, whoever thought that, right? And the things that are coming down the line in terms of functionality on these devices, and also expectations on the part of the user for those intelligent recommendations continue to advance. And so, yes, every day it's choosing things like, okay, we know what it will do eventually. What does it have to do better today? To get to that next step. So just like everything else, any other major project, whether you're writing a novel, right, or you're building out a social media platform, it's all small steps. So yesterday, or 3 weeks ago, we were saying, what is it about Instagram's sharing model that has allowed it to be so viral so quickly? And we did a very, very in-depth analysis of what is actually happening there that's different than other apps. And we found out a couple of things that we thought are part and parcel with what's fueling the adoption so quickly. So we started building them. We started building something similar, a similar structure to the Facebook Connect, Twitter Connect model into our app. And so these little things just happen. They happen one at a time, and eventually, as long as you kind of keep your eye on the larger vision and keep pushing in that direction, in a year, I think you could get very far. In 8 months, we've gone from 0 to where we are now. So in another year, I'm confident that we will be in a place that we're going to be very happy with.
So when you look at features that you're adding, this is the challenge. Entrepreneurs, this is the biggest challenge. It's putting the blinders on and focusing on what you have to do right now, not what you want to do, right? Because ultimately that's how. But you're saying that you have a little bit of leeway. So you look to see how Instagram is going so viral so quickly, and you think, okay, well, we have to do that. So we're gonna focus on that for a little while and then come back to that end game. Is that the way that you think, or?
A little bit. There's certain categories kind of things you need to do. Like for instance, that if you're gonna have a successful social media application, you've got to integrate with other pre-existing social media.
Right.
So then you think okay, how are we gonna do our Facebook Connect? How are we gonna do our Twitter Connect? And those are questions that have lingered for months, right? But then when you see someone doing it well, you start to really dig into that other application and say what can we learn from them? You don't want to think that you really just have all the answers, because you don't.
No.
And there are new answers that are emerging every day. Like there are new things to consider, and other people are doing progressive things in their own way every day. So it's kind of like we were planning on doing some really robust integration anyway. Lucky for us, Instagram exists, so we can learn something from them.
Yeah.
And of course, Twitter and Facebook are currently implemented on our platform, but there's just a way we could do it better. Other things that you think about are like, okay, what about an API? Something like that. Like, how can the recommendation engine we're building benefit any other media provider anywhere in the world?
Right.
Like, is there a way that if we build this thing, another developer could use it to deliver some other kind of media content to location? Absolutely. So, on the long term, you're thinking, well, we're going to do an API. And it'll have to be a mobile and a web API if we want it to be robust. So then you start looking at other companies' APIs and you start talking to crazy developers, and you kind of, see where it goes. But yeah, these things, they just, in a way, I think the simple answer is development is never finished.
No.
You just keep going.
Well, and that's that's the curse, the beauty and the curse of development, isn't it? Is that the old school printers would say, well, it's gone to bed. We can't change anything. That's what it is. That's the issue
Right.
that we're going to launch or we're going to release. But today it's like, well, I don't like that. I'm going to spend 24 hours fixing that, and we're going to put it up onto the App Store and redistribute. You brought up a really interesting point, though. APIs. We're API crazy right now, obviously. Everybody's got an API, and I love it. It allows businesses to be created on somebody else's technology by adding value to that person's technology. So Foursquare is the perfect one. How many companies have been started as a result of Foursquare? And there's going to be a number of these companies that are built on Foursquare's API that are going to have more users than Foursquare does, which is bewildering, right?
Right.
But when you were building your company, did you ever think, why are we building an app and a website? Why don't we build the infrastructure and then just be a part of Foursquare, be a part of Facebook Places, be a part of some other social network? You can still do that, obviously, but why build your own versus take the service into somebody else's product?
Yeah, well, there's the possibility of, we spoke recently with the guys at Foursquare, actually, because their API could be very, very useful for our product. And
but your API could be very useful for their product as well.
Well, that's the thing, right? So if what you're doing truly does fill a need, then I think it's a good idea to strike out on your own. Mm-hmm. If there was already a broadcaster out there that was doing the same thing, I don't think we would just get in and try to compete with them. But as it stands, there is no such thing as audio augmented reality. So there's a place for us to deliver a service that'll be appealing to users. So you build a consumer-facing product, which turns out to be a platform. But that said, like talking with the Foursquare guys, you could see how not only would their API be beneficial to us, but then anybody else using the Foursquare API that wants to wake up Broadcastr content inside of another application might be able to do that more easily. Yeah. Right, by cross-referencing kind of through the Foursquare API into the Broadcastr content and pulling everything back through and pushing back in. So, the APIs, like, why do your own platform? It's kind of like, if the need is there, I think you should do it. If the need is not there, then yeah, you might just be looking to get yourself hired at a place like Foursquare or Facebook if your idea is very good. But the cool thing is having this collaborative feel in the community. I was for 10 years, I was a sponsored snowboarder for 10 years. I was a half pipe rider.
Come on.
Yeah, in the 90s, leading up to about 2001 when I broke my femur. And something I try to explain to people about that time is things were progressing very rapidly. When I was in that sport at the beginning, it was a bunch of kids, just goofing around that liked to skateboard, and now we're snowboarding. And by 2002, it was a massive, massive industry. It saved winter sporting.
It's part of the Olympics, man. That's huge.
Happened. People I grew up with became gold medalists. It became massive. But what people never really understood, I think, in the mainstream, was that there was a community feel. So like when somebody in like 1996, if somebody landed the first ever double backflip, right? Everybody else didn't feel like, oh, we're all screwed now because like Mike Michalchuk, Canadian, right? Yep. Landed the first double backflip ever in competition. And so like now we should all just go home. Instead, the feeling was, great, Mike Michalchuk just showed us what's possible. And as a community, the sport that we all have congregated around has now progressed, right? And there was a feeling of this, like, we're all working together to collectively progress this thing that was very important to our lives, our lifestyles, and the way, everything, the way we lived, right? And I think right now in social media, there's a very similar feeling.
Absolutely.
Where it's like, if you're really doing something unique, you know, like if Foursquare succeeds at doing something great, or Instagram succeeds at doing something great, you know, that's a celebration because it pushes forward what you assumed, like the perimeter was here, but now it shows you, no, the perimeter is really out here.
Yeah.
And as we keep expanding that space, we're going to redefine the way people interact with media, information, technology, and each other and place in the next 10 years. And so it's exciting to be a part of that wave kind of as it's breaking, you know?
You know, it's such a difference from, I started my first company in the early 90s in the internet era. And at the beginning of the internet era, and it was a closed, contained environment. There was no such thing as open APIs. Microsoft was the dominant platform that didn't allow you in to see anything. And you know, even the technology, the companies that came out of open source software remained closed. And you saw what happened there. You know, a bubble, you know, exploded in early 2001. And what came of that was this generation of openness and pure joy around the technology, and the concept that literally use it, build value on top of it, and go ahead. You know, that kind of communal sharing, I think, is a once in a lifetime, once in a generational thing when it comes around a technology like mobile that allows you to do this. And so I'm pretty excited about what's going on here, and I know you are as well. But it strikes me that, you know, the innovation is just about to start happening with a lot of these companies, you know, when we get used to it. So you said very early on, that you got funding last summer. Was this a small angel round, friends and family? What was that?
When we had the idea, obviously the idea, you know, is compelling, but it's very hard to explain to somebody how what seems like a compelling idea is actually going to be built into an essential tool. And when it's not a Me Too idea, right? When it's not just like, oh, we're going to be the like Facebook of like for nonprofits or something, right?
Well, how many times have we heard this? I'm going to be the Foursquare of TV, right? Or of reading.
Right, yeah. Exactly.
I'm checking into page 141 of the Thank You Economy by Gary Vaynerchuk.
Right.
There's an idea.
Right, I'll be the group messaging of whatever. So when you're not doing a Me Too idea, when you really feel like you're building something new from scratch, or almost from scratch, people have a lot of trouble envisioning it. And of course, you can't demo it for them. It doesn't exist, exactly. Right? And so we're very fortunate to have a very, very small pool of angels, about 6 guys that put in a very small amount of money. You know, we built this thing on the cheap. We're in industrial space here in Brooklyn. You know, nobody's getting rich over here yet. And so, you know, we just bootstrapped the thing together for a very small amount of money, and then built it. And once we had it, then all the angel investors were like, now we see, we get it. All right. And so now then the question was, great, who can you partner with and how can we scale it? And if we succeed in scaling it and generating awareness about its existence, I feel that the experience of walking through the city and having these voices hit you is so compelling that users will stay, it'll be sticky, and we'll be able to seek an A round later this year, which is our goal. It
is. So you haven't received any other financing other than the original small amount that went into it?
Nope, that's it. And, you know, right now we're looking to do maybe a little seed round, you know, to help push it out and to help kind of bolster some of these partnerships that we're working with, or that we have in development. But and to continue development, as we talked about in the middle of this conversation.
Exactly.
But, you know, we might be trying to do a small seed round right now, and later this year we'd like to kind of roll that seed round into an A round.
Yeah, and you know, I think that you know, I love the way that you've done that, which is you know, build for a proof of concept, but a little bit deeper than a proof of concept to get people excited. And what really strikes me though is the stickiness. So you talk about the foundations that you're talking to about leveraging this technology. It absolutely makes sense, you know, and certainly companies like Audible.com, who is owned by Amazon, they're proving that the audio word, I don't know, that the spoken word, not audio word, the spoken word is still very relevant. I listen to audiobooks because it doubles my reading capability while I'm reading a book. I can read a book standing over here, and then I can listen to a book while I'm at the gym. Right. Same thing with podcasts. It just shows that this is still a vibrant community that needs this kind of technology. And I am tired of walking into a museum and putting on the crappy headsets to find out what's going on. So why not? The potential obviously is huge for you guys, and you're going to need some more money, I think, to be able to blow this out.
I couldn't agree with you more. We're looking for that money now, for sure. And I do think that, as you said, first of all, Audible is actually a partner of ours, which is great.
It's great. Yeah.
And audio has always worked in the mobile space, like kind of how you were mentioning in your examples. Like, as long as people still do the dishes, right? As long as people still drive cars. As long as people still go to the gym, as long as people still walk when it's nice outside, audio is going to be relevant because it allows you to stay engaged with your world. Yeah. And the more ubiquitous these things get, right, the more the relevancy of audio kind of creeps back into people's consciousness. Yeah. To be like, hey, I'm walking around with headphones on anyway. What else can I do to enhance or change that experience? What if I don't want to listen to music right now? Yeah. What if I want to do something else? And how can I have that experience, on top of that, be more interactive and feel more like I'm a part of a larger community and not be an isolating experience?
It's certainly, what I love about, companies and apps like Scavenger, for example, is that, their sole basis, and you guys would compliment Scavenger so well, obviously, is their sole reason for being is, the big idea is that it's integration, is that, they're very popular in campuses and universities and campuses and in naval bases because it's transient and people are trying to find their way and find how to meet people. Throw Broadcastr in that mix and you could get the history of a new neighborhood, a new campus, a new naval base in a second, right? Yeah. The audio tours, those kind of things really, these are all things that you've thought about. But even throw in augmented reality and tying it into, describing a house that is up on, the MLS listing or something like that from the owner's perspective. Nobody tells that story better.
No, or what about like the story of CBGBs, which is no longer there?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what about like walking into the field where Woodstock took place, and instead of it being a field, it could be 250,000 voices talking about their memory of that moment. It's going to be a way of doing something really interesting with our world and preserving our world in the way that we remember it and imagine it. And that's not going to be a static preservation. It's not just an archive, it's going to be churning and changing all the time. And to your point about the tours, I completely agree. It's going to be a great use of it. And the coolest part is going to be that anyone can become that tour giver, right? So there's going to be, my version of New York is going to be a completely different version than somebody else's. And because I can share that tour, I can have the possibility to have my version of New York become the version of New York. Right? And later I can be unseated when, Mos Def gives his version of New York.
Exactly.
But and then later some blogger, right, who's like, I'm going to make the definitive version, can do a mashup of my stuff and Mos Def stuff, and then we'll finally know what New York is really like.
Exactly.
So there's all these great ways that it yes, sure, you could think it's like a museum tour of the world, which is something we say all the time. But there is this kind of inherent difference because it's plastic, right? Yeah. Like the tour isn't fixed. It's like it's not that guide that you get at the museum and it's like press number 1 and
go here. Yep.
Yeah, it's more dynamic and more plastic than that, and it allows for more user interaction ultimately.
I love it. I'm so glad that we came across the website. I'm so glad that we featured it on the podcast. Simply because this is that layer that's something that I would use, that I will start contributing to, and so tell us how to get involved.
Yeah, sure. It's super easy. If you go to broadcastr.com, and that's of course broadcast with then a little R on the end.
No E.
We skip the E. There's actually a guy in Russia who owns that E. and we could not get it from him.
Well, I'm sure that once you get your A or B or C round, you'll be able to get it from him.
Then we buy that E.
Yeah, exactly. You buy that vowel is going to cost you a lot of money.
A lot of money. But we if you go to broadcastr.com, you can listen, and then when you want to record, you just click the record button on the screen. It'll ask you to register an account. It's free, right? You just put in your email, and then you just speak. You talk right at your computer, just like I'm talking into Skype now, and then you can pin it anywhere you want on the map, right? Or if you've got the iPhone app, and I can show you here.
Yeah, please do.
So here we have that map view we saw earlier. But if you look here on the bottom menu, I've got a little record icon. I just click on that, and it just brings up a little recorder. And so when I click on this record button, so now we're having a conversation. We're talking about Broadcastr, et cetera, et cetera. I say whatever I want, and then right away. So now we're having a conversation. We're talking about Broadcastr, et cetera, et cetera. I say whatever I want, and that's it, right? And then I can take that thing, I can add pictures to it, I can add categories to it, and then eventually I can just pin it right back to the map to live among this other content.
That's amazing.
So it's super simple. You just click the record button and talk.
If anybody's out there listening to this or watching this who's a Springsteen fan, there's a huge opportunity to go down to Asbury Park and do the Springsteen tour with Broadcastr, and certainly that would be popular among the folks down there.
That would be absolutely amazing. I would go. I'm a huge Asbury Park fan, and I would love to go down there and have the Springsteen tour of Asbury Park. I mean, nothing would make me happier than to hear that.
Go and do that. So broadcastr.com, or download the app from the App Store. You said that so 3 platforms: web, iPhone, and Android. Is that what you're working on?
That's correct. And web and iPhone are up now. Android will be up by hopefully April 4th.
What about BlackBerry? I'm Canadian. I have to ask that question about BlackBerry.
Right? Yeah. So BlackBerry, of course, Research in Motion, Canadian company.
Yep.
The issue right now we're having with BlackBerry is that their smartphones they're like kind of large screen, touch screen versions are not quite as robust to develop.
Nice. Well put.
as the iPhone and the Android. But that said, I know that BlackBerry has a lot of plans for tablets this year.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really interesting to us. And we'll be optimizing our app for the iPad, for the Android tablets that are coming out from all different companies. And if RIM puts out a sweet tablet, you'll see us there too.
Well, it's coming. They announced it April 18th, I think, or 19th, the availability. So I hope to see you on the BlackBerry as well at some point in the tablets. So broadcastr.com, the App Store, soon the Android Marketplace. Listen, Scott, I really appreciate you doing this. I'm so fascinated by what you're doing, this layer of knowledge that you're putting across the planet. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think the integration of what you're doing with a lot of what everybody else is doing, it just closes that loop. It just adds so much value to the mobile world, and I love the idea. So listen, I really appreciate you doing this.
Sure, thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's always fun to talk about it, especially with somebody who really gets it.
Well, I appreciate it. So I've been speaking with Scott Lindenbaum, who is the co-founder of Broadcastr, without the E, just the R. Go there to broadcastr.com and go and take a look and go start listening to some of the stories, and then go and start contributing. And anybody who's a Springsteen fan, go and do that right away, because I'll be down in New York soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah. Have a good one, guys.
I really appreciate you guys listening and watching wherever you are. That's been another episode of Untethered.tv.